things. Number one, RE. This is RE for RE1, 5.1. Then there's an SLS. This SLS is on flowers and pollination. Okay, all the SLS that we will give you are not the parts of the chapter. They are the parts that you learn sort of before in primary school or in lower grade. For example, flower parts or pollination. Cover a bit of it in primary school or lower grade. So it's meant as a recap. So that we don't use in class time for that. We dive straight to J4 portions. When it comes to human reproduction, I don't need to cover the parts in class. Right? So that will be on SLS. My role is to zoom into the parts that you may not know so well about. Right? Or highlight key important parts. Okay? So, two things to work on at the end of today. If you want to find out what is the outline for the entire, I've done this for class, I've said this for class. Okay, if you want to find out outline of the entire term, please refer to the schedule, which is in our group chat. Put it there. So for example, today, 2nd July, we're going to go through the overview of reproduction. You will also find the page number that I'm going to go through. So, you want to help yourself. You want to get a preview of what's coming up next, you can go and pre-read. Right? I don't include the rest of the pages, but you can pre-read and you can come to class a bit prepared. I also put in the RE or what needs to be done and the due date. I also input all these due dates onto the Google Classroom. Google Classroom sends you reminders. The due date is coming. Oh, 1 day before. Okay lah. I mean, that's usually how we function, right? 1 day before, then I do my lesson. Okay, so when the reminders come in, it serves a purpose of helping you out also. Okay? Today, we're going to start off with reproduction. We're going to give an introduction to the topic. Yeah. Okay, very exciting. Winnie, you want to start? Oh, you started already. Oh, okay. Because of camera. Okay. My bad. Reproduction. Before I begin and tell you stuff that you may already know, how about we talk about what you think you already know, right? Sexual reproduction. And any other forms of reproduction you know? Asexual reproduction. Asexual. Very excited. Okay. Sexual, asexual reproduction. I would like you to spend some time talking to your friends about what you recall of this, the two, and then I will tease it out from you one by one. Okay? Alright, so the next 1 to 2 minutes, please talk to your friends, talk about what you know about sexual and asexual, and then I'll ask you. Okay? The more you don't discuss, the more I'll choose you lah. Okay? Sexual, asexual. What's the difference? You think of at least 3 differences. Okay, wrap up your conversations. Now I invite a few of you to share. asexual reproduction, what's the difference? What do you already know? Then we will value add and we'll add on to what you don't know. Okay? Right. Maybe I begin with Arish. Arish, can you share one thing you know about sexual or asexual reproduction?
One involves two parents and the other one involves one parent.
Which one involves two parents?
Sexual.
Sexual involves two parents. One involves one parent. Okay? Have you all heard this before? No? Okay. Well, how do I describe this? Yes. Yeah, one male, one female. Sexual reproduction. Okay, asexual reproduction is the special one. One individual can produce another individual without any contact, without any shuffling. One parent. Can we carry out asexual reproduction? If we could, what would that look like? Later on, I will share about the various methods of asexual reproduction. Then you tell me if we could, which method would you like to go through? If we could. Okay. Any other differences you know of? Honey? Oh, okay. Sexual reproduction involves fertilization. Between what? Okay. What kind of cells? Okay, gametes. Between gametes. What are gametes? Sorry, yeah? Okay, they are haploid cells. Okay, thank you. Gametes are haploid cells. When they come together, fertilization occurs. More commonly, you have heard of sperm and egg. Sperm, egg come together, fertilize, zygote, that's fertilization. Asexual? Okay, no fertilization involved. No fertilization. Anything else? Zoe? Oh, Zoe got a shock. I thought her name she shook a bit. Yes. Okay, asexual, you produce genetically identical offspring. What does genetically identical mean? The genes are the same. Or more specifically, the alleles are the same. You have the same form of every single gene also. If I have black hair color, if I could carry out asexual reproduction, my copy would also have black hair color. In other words, it is a clone. Alright, it's a clone. Sexual reproduction? Okay, just not genetically identical. Why so? Why is it not genetically identical? Okay. Remember in meiosis, there was crossing over, independent assortment of chromosomes. It's kind of a shuffle. It's like we're shuffling cards. You know what sexual reproduction is like? It's like mom, dad come together, both of them have poker cards. Then they want to make a new deck of cards. Then they do a shuffle, right, at night or the day. Right? Then they take out the cards, then they shuffle. Then they take out half the deck from mother, half the deck from father, put it down, they combine the deck, then we get a baby. Essentially, that's what we're doing. We're really just shuffling cards and then passing on to the next generation. If your mom and dad doesn't shuffle the cards properly, actually the offspring will end up looking alike. Have you ever played a game where the person will shuffle, then you get the same cards? Right? So, sexual reproduction, in other words, all we are doing here is we are shuffling the alleles, making sure each offspring gets a different hand of the cards. If we don't shuffle it properly, then actually it's kind of like asexual. Don't shuffle, just cut the deck in half and then distribute. You'll look very similar or identical to the parent. But what's different is that all of us have slightly different poker cards. My poker card maybe is a Pokemon design. Another person's poker card may be the classic design. You can still shuffle together. But you cannot shuffle a poker card with a Uno deck. Right? You just cannot form an offspring that way. So maybe a dog that goes by has Uno cards. It doesn't work out. Okay? Any more? Any more that you'd like to contribute? I like to think that these are the key differences between sexual and asexual reproduction. Okay? On page 17 of the textbook, you can see a summary of the differences between the two. I'd like you to star this table because this is an essay you could write for this particular introduction of the topic. Okay? Compare and contrast sexual and asexual reproduction. Off the top of your head, most of us can at least take 3 points because we covered from primary to lower sec to upper sec. It is the new points that perhaps we want to talk about. Yes? Okay, sexual. Here we talk about 2 parents. In your textbook they put 1 or 2 parents. Okay, how is it possible 1 parent can carry out sexual reproduction? Externally? I don't know. I cannot say you're wrong. I don't know. I've not read enough to know whether externally that will happen. I could give you an example. Let's say we have a plant, and then it has flowers. Flowers come with male and female parts. Both produce gametes. The male gamete and then the female gamete. Fertilization can happen within the same plant, same parent. Yeah? So it is possible. I know of a flatworm that has both male and female parts, and it just fold upon itself and poke itself up. So yeah, that is sexual also because you have 2 haploid gametes fertilizing each other, and then you get a zygote. Sexual. Yes. What about what? Twins. Okay, what about it? Oh, is that asexual, is it? Twins, is it? Oh, okay. Then how is it possible that twins are identically the same? Okay, so you notice the phrasing. Twins are identical to each other, but they are not identical to the parent. Yeah? So it is still a product of sexual reproduction. Why are twins identical to each other? Because after sexual fertilization, the zygote over here splits into 2 exact same zygotes. Each one goes on its merry way to develop a new human being. Okay, so it's slightly different method. Okay, the table that's provided in your textbook is the critical table. Some of the points we've hit already. 1 parent involved, 1 or 2 parents. Some new points that perhaps we've not included yet. Asexual reproduction typically involves mitosis. Sexual involves meiosis because you need to produce a haploid gametes. Third one typically does not involve production of the haploid gametes. Kind of like what the first one was Harish, second one was Hane. Okay, kind of what Hane was saying. There's production of haploid gametes, there isn't production of haploid gametes in asexual. Number 4, the point by Zoe, they are not genetically identical. For sexual, asexual, you tend to produce clones of each other. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Right? Like 100 Harish or 100 Abhi. And therefore, asexual reproduction can occur quite fast. Point number 6. As compared to sexual. Sexual, you need to find a mate first. Right? Asexual, you feel like it, pop another one. Okay, and therefore you can produce a very large number when it comes to asexual reproduction. Sexual, it takes time. You find a partner first before you can go on to produce more. Last 2 points, 7 and 8. 7, does not occur in higher life forms, asexual reproduction. I'd like you to, this point is an interesting point. We'll look at it later on, because you find that this may not be true across the board. It can occur even in animals. 8, it is usually associated with colonization or static environment, asexual reproduction. If I want to colonize a place with many of me, it would be best to carry out asexual reproduction. You can do it really, really fast. And the best part of it is, if I am well adapted to this environment, produce many of myself, we are a strong army. But the reason why all of us are different is because our environment is constantly changing. Some of us may be better adapted to stay under the sun, some not so much. If a sudden heat wave comes, maybe Junying will survive the whole calamity. Some of us may move on. But the diversity helps. Some of us have strengths here, some of us have strengths there. It depends on which condition comes by, but at least the entire human population doesn't just disappear. But clones are a bit dangerous. Can you imagine all of us are strong in one area but weak in another area? And then, the weak condition comes, all of us will die together. Right? So there are pros and cons to both processes. Today, subsequent lessons we're going to dive into sexual reproduction. But today, we're just going to look into the wacky world of asexual reproduction. How can you produce clones of yourselves? I mean, we can't, but how do animals do it? Or plants? Okay. Asexual reproduction broadly is the production of genetically identical offspring, and you involve one parent. A lot of times it involves mitosis, it may not always. I'm going to play a video to just quickly run through the various forms of asexual reproduction. You can find it on page 14. Thank you. On page 14, you can find all the different forms of asexual reproduction. I do not need you to go and memorize this. Okay? Don't memorize all the different descriptions. Appreciate it will do. Okay? Or at least know the bolder words, so that if I give an MCQ, then I ask you which one is asexual, you can pinpoint. Right? You don't need to memorize. But I'd like to give you a flavor of what all the different kinds of asexual reproduction. Then I'll show you some of the samples I have. Alright? I think that would be the most exciting part.
Asexual reproduction. By the end of this topic, you will be able to describe different types of asexual reproduction, describe vegetative propagation and its types, describe different methods of artificial propagation. Asexual reproduction is a form of reproduction that involves the production of a new organism by a single parent. Fission refers to the division of parent cells into two parts. This is the simplest type of reproduction and is seen in single-celled organisms such as amoeba and paramecium. In amoeba, the nucleus first divides into two equal parts. This is followed by the division of the cytoplasm. Thus, the two daughter amoeba formed grows and attain full size and then split again. In some organisms, such as Spirogyra and Flatworm, the organism breaks up into two or more fragments after maturation. These fragments grow into new individuals. In budding, one or more new organisms grow in the form of a bulb-like projection called bud. It grows and then may eventually break away from the parent. If you view a solution of warm water, sugar, and yeast powder under the microscope, you will observe in yeast that a little cytoplasm accumulates at one end of the cell, and the bud is formed. The nucleus divides into two, and one of them enters the bud. In yeast, the buds form rapidly and create a chain of yeast cells if there is enough supply of nutrition. In Hydra, bud appears on the body wall, which grows into a full hydra in a day or two and separates from the parent. A spore is a tiny spherical unicellular body covered with a thick wall. It grows into a new plant when conditions are favorable. bread mold that can often be seen growing on moist, stale bread grows when spores settle on the bread. In the regeneration mode of reproduction, an introduction of new plants, production refers to the production of new plants from parts of the mother plant, such as roots, stems, or leaves, without help of any reproductive organ. Potato. There are several buds present on the surface of a potato called eye. A piece of potato with at least one eye on its surface is planted in the soil to develop a new plant. Ginger. In ginger, new plants are produced by some parts of underground stems. Onion. In onion, new plants are produced from the bulb, which is an underground stem with thick leaves. Strawberry. In plants like strawberry, the shoots with the buds bend towards moist land and grows into a new plant. Bryophyllum. The plant of bryophyllum reproduces with the help of its leaves. A bryophyllum leaf contains various buds on its margin. When these buds fall on moist soil, they give rise to new plants. Step asexual reproduction.
So, if you could carry out asexual reproduction, which method would you prefer? Budding. You know what budding would look like? Thinking about it, what would budding look like? It would be, you know, this, if a lady comes in class, looks pregnant, right? Then lift up the shirt, right? One more face there. That's what budding would look like, you know. Budding, you form the individual gradually, until it's ready, then it buds off. So, Nicole, you want budding, right? Sure lah. But then you will have two Nicoles talking at one time until it's ready, then you go. Yeah, what method would you like? I've thought about it before. Sorry? Which one? Spores. Oh, what would spores look like? Spores would look like, can you imagine, you're a dandruff now. A lot of dandruff. Spores is like when then a lot of small little cells of your cell fly off, then they land somewhere, then after that, right, 500 bunsies come out. And that would be what sporulation is like. Sorry, you did that? Which one? Vegetative propagation. Hey, you don't know Shanae for another class? Shanae very funny. You know, ponytail, right? It's like, what if I come ponytail? Then I stick into the soil. Right? 5 weeks later, when you pull the ponytail out, one Shanae comes out of there. Right? That would be what vegetative propagation is. It's like, you kind of grow an entire being from one part of it. Fragmentation is not so much for plants, more for other organisms. But kind of the same concept. It will be another student, say, I chop my arm, then let the arm run around, then soon the arm will start to grow a new body. Then I grow a new arm. That's what fragmentation is. I'm going to show you something. Fragmentation. Maybe I should fission first. Here's a video of bacteria carrying out fission. Fission is kind of like meiosis, but the main difference is that it occurs with unicellular organisms. Meaning to say, a single bacterium is a single organism by itself. Another difference is that when we look at fission, it tends to not involve any nucleus at all. Bacteria don't come with nucleus, but we do come with one. Right? We have to divide the nucleus. They don't divide any nucleus. On top of that, they kind of divide their DNA on the go. When it's time to split, then they divide the DNA. But we divide our DNA during interphase. We prepare everything first, then we do the split. But you notice this method, fission, occurs really, really fast. Every 20 minutes, one bacteria will split into two. Right? So in 24 hours, right, well, boom. Right, you just like, it's exponential, it just keeps increasing. From 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16, yeah, it just keeps going. Okay, that's fission. tends to occur for unicellular organisms. Then there's fragmentation. Fragmentation, I find the coolest, the creepiest. I'm going to show you one of the flatworm. Watch what happens when you chop this flatworm up.
Thanks to CuriosityStream for supporting PBS Digital Studios.
Thank you.
This goofy little guy is called a Planarian. Sure, it's just a flatworm at the bottom of a pond, but it has a very special superpower, one that scientists would love to harness. To show you, well, it's gonna get a little bit slasher movie here. Okay, don't worry. It's going to be okay. Seriously. I promise. It doesn't even hurt.
It's not sashimi.
That would be curtains for most organisms. I mean, this piece here is just a chunk with no head and no tail. But watch. You can see under a microscope that overnight its wound heals closed. Okay, maybe we could do that, more slowly of course. But then it starts to regenerate, growing new tissue. It's that white part, called the blastema. In a week, see those tiny little spots? They're new eyes grown from scratch. But the Planarian, can I call it that yet? It still kind of looks like a blob. By day 12, it's starting to look like a proper Planarian. It's got a head, an entirely new one, and a new tail. And it's doing its regular Planarian things, like pooping. That's because one of the first things it started regrowing was a tube called the pharynx, which is how things go in and out. It sucks out food, like this beef liver that scientists are feeding it. After 3 weeks, it looks totally normal. From that one Planarian, you get 4. Other animals, like this newt, can regrow a toe or a tail. But Planarians are practically the only animal that can regrow a head. So why can't we do that? Well, it all comes down to powerful cells known as stem cells. They're the green dots here, and they make up 1/5 of a Planarian's body. They can turn into different kinds of cells and make every new body part. We only have stem cells that act like these when we're embryos. Once we grow up, we pretty much lose this ability. Though doctors have been able to get us to grow back a fingertip. But what if we could grow ourselves anew? A whole arm or a liver? Scientists are trying to figure out exactly how Planarians do it. And maybe one day, these humble flatworms could inspire new ways to heal our injuries. Hi, it's Lauren.
Recently, as I was going through the forest, I had the privilege of finding a flatworm myself. Look at this flatworm, it's quite different from the one in the video. This is called a hammerhead flatworm. Why is it called that? Maybe this helps. I love this particular flatworm. Like a zebra with a spade head. It is a hammerhead flatworm. Fun fact, flatworms, they don't have any mouth to chew food. So what they do is they eject out all their digestive juices onto whatever they want to digest. digest finish, then they suck it in. It's like you going to the canteen, then you onto your food, let the food digest ready, then take a straw and suck it back in. Right? That is what flatworms do. The most funny thing was that on this day, what it's doing right now is it was chasing a snail. So flatworms, this particular flatworm, this species feeds on snails. And so what it did was it was chasing a snail. It was the most epic chase you can imagine, right? One snail and one flatworm. They were just following each other and so just watching it. But what happens when it catches up to the snail is that it will inject its neurotoxins, cause it to paralyze, then it all its digestive juices, digests and it sucks the snail in. That's what a flatworm does. And there's a quite unique mode of reproduction it can go through, asexual fragmentation. Just a small part of it can regenerate into a new part, a new whole. We talk about sporulation in the video. You tend to find this in fungi, in some plants. You also talk about budding. You may have heard about it happening in yeast before, but it also can happen in other organisms, like in particular Hydra. Okay, so I do not need you to know all this in depth. Just know that there are these various forms. Okay, appreciate, right? Today we're just engaging the wacky world of reproduction. Asexual reproduction. Another form, vegetative propagation. Here I have a potato that I forgot to cook for around a month. Yeah? And you can see that the eyes have already started, it cannot wait. Starting to grow out already. But if I were to take out any one of these eyes, right? Here I've got an eye. And if I throw it into the soil there, it will produce another potato that's identically identical. Okay, you all take care of this. This one has a mini eye. Sure, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay, later. Okay, so there are many eyes. Later, I suppose later around, you want to claim one eye, you want to produce a genetically identical potato. Go ahead. There you go. Okay, can look at all the eyes that are popping out. It's literally popping out. There's one more form of asexual reproduction that I find most fascinating. Multicellular organisms like animals, they can actually go through a form of reproduction called parthenogenesis. Right? You can produce an entire being without fertilization at all. I'd like to give you an example. Today I brought one of my ant colony. No, it's a budding new one, right? It's not quite grown fully yet. It is a colony of one of the fastest, one of the animals on land that can move a body part super fast. The claws of this ant. The claws can slam shut 60 meters per second. Wow. That is 2,300 times faster than you can blink. So just imagine that. In fact, this particular species, it can snap so hard to the point that if you were to disturb it, you can hear it click.
That is so cool.
Okay, so the ant that I brought today is called a trapjaw ant.
Wow.
Yeah? It can slam shut really fast. But as I pass this around, I would like you to observe. Okay, later on as you see some like brown rice krispies. That's not the food. Those are actually the cocoons. Did you know, I didn't know until I started making ants, that ants start off as like a mini caterpillar, then it goes through a cocoon phase, then it hatches out as a mature ant. They do not hatch as a baby ant, and then they grow into a big ant. They go through what butterflies go through, metamorphosis. Yes, the tiny ants you see are adult already. Yeah? They don't grow bigger. They always start off as a caterpillar, and then after that they go into cocoon, then they come out as an adult. Whatever ant you see is already an adult. Right? But observe as you pass it around, there are sort of like two kinds of ants there. One, this kind with the claws. Another one with wings. They're actually the same species of ant, but different genders. I want to guess which one is the male, which is the female. Female one with the wings. Actually, the male is the one with the wings. Okay? The queen ant tends to come with wings. So the queen ant and the male ants tend to come with wings so they can fly out the nest, mate with each other and form a new colony. All the other workers that you find inside the colony, they are all female. So you know what's interesting about my trapjaw ants is that diploid diploid queen can lay eggs. If the eggs are fertilized by a male ant, if it's fertilized by a male ant, the sperm, you will end up getting female ant, which is the thread jaw one. Okay? If it is not fertilized, you actually get a male ant. In the ant kingdom is quite different. For us, what gives us our gender trait is concentrated in that XY chromosome. For insects, it's spread across, such that half of it, if you get haploid number of chromosomes, you will actually come out male. In other words, no fertilization is take place. It just develops from a haploid egg into a male adult. And that's the form of parthenogenesis. No fertilization. Yeah, but the males the males are haploid. Right? The males are haploid. All the females you see are diploid. Don't know about you, but you sense an issue here. The males are haploid. The females are diploid. I just said that the males are haploid, right? So then how can you produce a sperm that can fertilize this haploid egg? So this egg is haploid. Then this sperm how? Right? If the male ant starts off haploid, then how to produce a sperm? You already have it? One student suggested maybe just one part of the ant, one part of the male ant just take off and then fertilize. No, it has to be a sperm. Right? You want to think about it? How is it possible this male ant that's haploid can produce a sperm that is also haploid? How is it possible a male ant that's haploid can produce a sperm that's haploid, such that the female ant is diploid? Divide? Divide and goes back. Okay? Have a think. Anyone has any speculation? Now we are applying the logic of what we've done, mitosis, meiosis. How is it possible, right? Take it up. Oh.
Extend the cell and then
For mitosis, is it? Or meiosis. So you want to put it through meiosis. So this male ant goes through meiosis. Okay. If a haploid male ant goes through meiosis, what kind of sperm will we get? Cannot, right? So meiosis will always produce a gamete that is has half number of chromosomes. But what we don't see that. Somehow, male ants, they are haploid, can produce haploid sperms. Genetically identical. How is it possible? You're right. So, male ants, they produce their sperms through mitosis, not meiosis. The reason why I'm sharing this with you is to show you that in the animal kingdom, things are not so straightforward. We teach you and say blanket, to produce a sperm and an egg always require meiosis. Right? To produce genetically identical cells always require mitosis. But if you apply the concept, it has more value. Because you find in the animal kingdom, plant kingdom, you don't quite follow rules all the time. Right? So what I teach you is general. But what you see in real life, actually just apply the concepts that have been taught. Right? Mitosis. A male ant just goes through mitosis so they can produce a sperm that's also haploid. Female ants go through the process of meiosis so that it can produce haploid eggs. Apply the concept and appreciate that the animal kingdom, plant kingdom is wacky. There are many exceptions to it. Not only can ants do this, bees can do it too, some reptiles can do it. In fact, the Komodo dragon can reproduce this way.
critics cite it as a major factor against the existence of most cryptid creatures. But a recent discovery could turn that argument upside down. Mendeleev's modern relatives, Komodo dragons, can multiply without a mate. Called parthenogenesis, it is the process of producing offspring without male fertilization, and it has surprised the experts.
There are a handful of reptiles out there that do reproduce parthenogenically. It came as a big shock, I think, to most people that komodos were capable of doing it.
Nate Nelson is the head zookeeper for Sedgwick County Zoo in Wichita, Kansas. The zoo's newest Komodo dragon was hatched parthenogenically.
He's a parthenogenic offspring. He was produced without the genetic input of the father. That means the female lays eggs, which then develop normally without fertilization from the male.
Nelson's and critics cited that
Just like my aunt, you kind of expect something like that. Look at the males. The male is called a haploid drone. Males go, the middle one, haploid drone. Males go through mitosis to produce haploid sperms. In other words, the ant can go through both sexual and asexual reproduction. Right? So, as we study biology, understand that what we teach you are just generalizations. In the real world, there are tons of exceptions. There could be a bit of both. In fact, it's quite cool, my ants. What they do is this. The queen ant mates with many male ants, and then it stores the sperms of the male ants in a sperm sac within itself, such that it doesn't need to mate anymore in its lifetime. Whenever it wants a new female, it will use some sperms, and then it will produce females. Whenever it wants a male, it will just lay eggs and let it grow out. So the female has now some control. If I want male, then I just don't fertilize from my pouch of sperms that are collected during the happy shuffle time. Yeah? I'd like to show you a little bit more specimens. Today I brought my case of insects.
Oh my god.
Yes. Oh, thank you for my potato. Okay? These are all insects contributed from students. Some by myself too. I did not kill any of these insects. Okay, I like to collect insects just that I find around. So students have been helping me also. Most recently, I found some queen ants and some worker ants I'd like to show you.
Oh my gosh.
It is so epic, right? That wow, you is my okay. So I'm going to pass these around. Number one, recently over the holidays, someone found a queen ant this big. This is a queen ant. You know, yeah, this is an ant. It's not a toy, it's real. This is called the giant forest ant. You can find it in a lot of tropical countries. Singapore is one of them that has this giant species of ant. Here is its worker ant. It is a female worker ant deployed, the queen also deployed. Giant forest ant. I'm going to pass this around. Yeah, okay. If you dare to, feel free to touch it if you want to. Okay, I'll pass it around here. I also have another species of ant, both the male and female, so you can have a look. This particular species of ant is called Caribera castania. It is often eaten in Thailand. Okay, yeah, eaten. Ants are rich source of protein. It grows so fast also. Actually, a very sustainable food source. So this is the queen ant. The male ant looks smaller, but it also comes with wings. Okay, this is the male version. It's so much smaller. So actually now you know. Next time if you see ants with wings, they are either male ant or they are either a queen ant. Any ant without wings are female ants that are not queens. The difference between a queen is that a queen can store sperms. And so, if you ever find ants with wings, can you help me fetch and pass to me? Then I can start a new ant colony. Okay, so feel free to pass around. If you like to touch it, go ahead. Yes. Don't touch it. Okay, I told you all these specimens, I just walk around school, I find dead on the floor, I just pick it up and preserve it. I don't have the heart to kill insects. And therefore I think that's why I've been blessed with just keeps falling out of the sky. Like literally and yeah. Like for example, this particular dragonfly. This dragonfly over here, I just walked out of the staff room and it was there. Yeah, then just pick it up. Yeah, don't have to throw one. Okay, so for today, I will leave this specimen box in the classroom for you to explore if you want to. Feel free to open up. You can take out the pins and observe it up close if you want to. If you feel like it, you can also touch it. Okay, I'm okay with that. Just don't touch it with too much force. It may snap and break. Okay? A lot of insects can carry out sexual and asexual reproduction. The asexual form tends to be parthenogenesis. It just lays an egg, and the egg just develops into another individual. But I have a question for you. This form of reproduction, where it produces a haploid sperm, the unfertilized egg develops into an ant, is the male ant genetically identical to the queen ant? Okay, I got a question for you. Is the male ant, which is haploid, genetically identical to the queen ant?
Yes. No.
Why not? Why can't be? Because it's male. Sorry? Yeah, because right, one of the definitions we had of asexual is that it's one parent, okay, it takes the box, one parent, and it should be genetically identical. But then you see the male that come out, it looks like it's totally different from the female, right? So is it truly genetically identical? Not exactly. Right, the males actually are not genetically identical in that it just have half the amount of DNA that the parent had. In fact, it may not have the same combination as the parent because I just got one half of it. So I bring up parthenogenesis just as an example to show you off. There are many exceptions to reproduction. There's no one straightforward method. It is a little bit more straightforward in the weeks ahead because we're just going to focus on humans. Okay? So there's only one way about it. We cannot carry out asexual. You won't see me come to school one day with a bulb over here. Right? We cannot do that. Right? So it's more straightforward in that sense. We are going to start off first with plant reproduction. Right? For plant reproduction, we're going to look at flowers and how flowers become fruits and then become seeds. For today, I would just like to end off with this. Okay? What should we recap for the next lesson? I hope that we can string each lesson together such that you don't feel like separate lessons. Right? So, could you help me out? Take out your phone or your iPad. For Mentimeter, I would just like you to share something that you think is important from today's lesson that we can recap together the next one so that there's a link. And then we will see what's common among all of us that you think is important that we should recap before we dive into the next section of the lesson. Anyone sits here? Okay, can I put a specimen box here? Okay, you all can explore it later on. Okay, so what should we recap? You could write down what you learned today that you felt was important. Winnie, actually, I think you can stop. It may have already stopped. That means the iPad